What's up, everybody? I've just finished talking to Gigi Alcock. He is an expert on informal economics and business in South African townships. Expect to hear the beautiful stories of success that make the South African informal sector worth at least 750 million rand, in his opinion. Expect to learn why our unemployment rate might not be what it seems, if crypto has any space in the informal sector, and just how big the opportunities are that are being missed by large corporates in South Africa. All this and much more. Let's dive straight in. Gigi Alcock, welcome to ZEAL Podcast.
Great, thank you.
Your name only has 2 letters in it. Why?
Well, it's a long story, but basically my parents were political activists and community workers, and they brought us up in a mud hut in a Zulu village in a place called Msinga in KwaZulu-Natal. But that wasn't why I got my name. So originally they actually were fighting government forced removals, where the government trucks and bulldozers were bulldozing down people's homes. And in Zulu, you're named after a characteristic or an event. So I was actually named after the event where people were forcefully removed, and the number plate on those vehicles was GG, which was government garage. So I often say, I was the first personalized number plate in this country. So, yeah.
I wanted to ask you about that. Your upbringing is so unique, and I just wanted to ask, what do you feel you were blessed with and you learned being brought up in that environment, whereas so many other kids with blonde hair and blue eyes, they never had that opportunity?
Yeah. Well, I had the blonde hair, but not anymore, as you can see. But so I think, the first obvious one is Zulu, but I think, that's kind of overstated because a lot of people speak Zulu, especially in like the Eastern, a lot of white people speak Zulu in like KZN and Eastern Cape and stuff. I think the bigger thing was, living with and like Zulus, we learned a lot about lifestyle and culture, and really deeper things about, especially things around culture and most of those, have been really important for me in terms of building my marketing business when I did, because it's really, marketing is also about understanding modern culture. It's about understanding lifestyle and behavior. And if those are familiar to you, it's easier. If they're foreign to you, you kind of don't know what to look for in terms of understanding that. So that was the one thing. When I was quite young, I said to my father, will you send me to university? And he said, I can't afford to send you to university, but I'll prepare you for life in Africa. And I never managed. Wow. I've still never been to university. But, so I think a lot of that upbringing was understanding Africa, and particularly a part of Africa that's invisible to most people, which is this kind of informal space that's either in rural areas or in townships or in inner cities, which is quite foreign to many people.
And you moved from Msinga to Joburg. You worked as a bricklayer. You welded burglar bars to windows. Talk to me about the founding of Minanawe and meeting DJ Fats and how it was just so different to anything else at that time.
So in Msinga they call Johannesburg Kwandonga Ziyaduma, which means the place where the walls thunder.
Why?
Because it's a loud, scary place, and all the skyscrapers, when the cars go, you get this echo. And, coming from Msinga, where there's nothing higher than a mud hut, it's this kind of real shock to the senses. So when, so I moved here. In fact, before that, I was a political activist and kind of anti-apartheid activist. And I kind of wanted to leave that space and go and find a different life. And so I wasn't qualified for anything except doing in the townships and stuff. So I, as you said, I was a bricklayer. I did literally anything I could. I started a telephone business in the townships long before the mobile kind of revolution. And I kind of realized, at some stage, I was asked by some journalists to help them access the townships to do interviews with people. And I realized that one of my qualities or strengths was the ability to access places that other people couldn't access. I knew where the townships were. I mean, at the time, Soweto, there wasn't a single signpost on the highway saying Soweto this way. So you know those spaces. I also had access because I had my friends, either the Zulus in the hostels or the kind of ANC comrades who that I'd been in the anti-apartheid space with. And so, that kind of led, not very directly, but over time, I ended up realizing that people needed that, and there was a commercial opportunity in creating access, and started with two of my comrades from the kind of previous life, Sandile and Jabulani. We decided to start Minanawe, and Minanawe was really about, the word Minanawe means you and I. So it was really about creating relationships with people in this township space, as in brand relationships. Although we were also involved in many ways in things like helping corporates understand diversity and doing immersions into these spaces. And of course, there was no data at the time. There was very little knowledge about that space. Most people didn't think there was a market, that there was money in that space. So we had to spend a lot of time building databases, other shops, of fast food outlets, of stokvels, of muti shops, whatever it took. And also developing a network of, we also spent a lot of time developing a network of resourceful individuals. We realized very quickly that we didn't need to find people who had a specific qualification in marketing or logistics or whatever. We needed people who, were part of the community, who had a street sus, who, I'm kind of like, they were the kind of the main local people, and they were kind of almost fixers. You have this thing of these fixers that people use to go into war zones and stuff. So we always found the fixers wherever we went. And it was the early 90s. It was like chaos in South Africa politically. There was a lot of violence. There was a lot of crime, and yet we were able to, because we had this network of people and stuff, we were able to operate. We were one of the few people who operated successfully, and I knew where to go and had these databases. One of the kind of real characters was a guy that I met. We ran this crazy thing called the Soweto Beach Party, where we put 400 tons of beach sand down a dam in Soweto. We put ocean-going yachts on the dam, and we ran a beach party for Captain Morgan Spice Gold.
Insane.
Yeah, crazy thing. And we needed a DJ, and someone brought me this really large, fat guy, and his name was Fats. And I was like, I need an MC, not someone going to sit behind a DJ box. And anyway, I realized when this beach party happened, Fats is the most energetic person on the planet, and he literally ruled the roost of that beach party. And we had this crazy event that ran for almost 10 years, which became one of the biggest events in South Africa.
It went on for 10 years.
Just under 10 years. I think it was about 9 years that we ran it. It was Captain Morgan Spice Gold, and then Vodacom took it over, and it was a crazy annual event. Insane.
And you write extensively about having to go in to the townships, or for those of you who don't know, Kasi is a Zulu word for township. So to go into the townships or the Kasi and do research. So I wanted to ask you you write extensively about school mamas and fat cook vendors. Talk to me about, you even wrote that they had to sell 50 sandwiches and soups in 15 minutes to make money. Talk to me about how much money they actually make in a month, and how we actually don't realize it.
So, I mean, one example is a Gogo in downtown Johannesburg in Van Willig Street. And her and her husband have been selling there for about 12 years. And she wakes up, or they wake up at 2 in the morning. They take a taxi to downtown Johannesburg. By 3 o'clock, they're selling vet cook. And they sell 3,000 vet cook a day for R1 each.
3,000?
3,000 vet cook a day,
Yes.
and they sell about 500 rands worth of cheese slices, polony, tea, and coffee. And so they make a profit of anywhere between 1,000 and 1,500 rand a day from selling vet cook and cheese slices and so on. And we kind of walk past them and we go like, oh, shame. And yet they're doing very well. They're building a double-story house in Meadowlands in Soweto, and they're very successful. And they're one of many like that. And the same in the schoolyard. So most township kids get given what's called ikeri or pocket money, and they buy from the mamas in the schoolyard. And I was at a schoolyard in Tembisa a while ago, and there was this lady, and she was selling snacks and stuff, and she's sitting on this upturned bucket with a plank on top of it. And I said to her, how long have you been selling here? She said, 26 years. I'm like, 26 years selling from that upturned bucket and plank? She said, I put 2 children through university selling from here, and my husband has been unemployed the entire time. And she works for 3 hours a day, first break, second break, and after school. And she makes a profit of 6,500 rand a month selling from that bucket. And as she said, put her kids through school and does very successfully. And this is the thing, is that we tend to kind of look down on people and go, oh, shame, they're there because they have no alternatives, and that if they could get a job, they would take it, a formal job. And actually, they're very proud of this, and they're making more money in most cases than they would make if they were in a formal job. And there's many. And I think the mistake, again, in terms of looking at this informal sector, and I called it Kasinomics because I didn't want this concept of informal is small scale, unstructured, unsophisticated, low tech, low income, none of which are true to the majority. And I say, you need to take a mirror to the formal economy, and you will see every single one of the same businesses in the informal economy. They're just often invisible. So we tend to kind of think the informal economy is rows of spaza shops or rows of hawkers, and is much richer with fairly substantial businesses.
That leads quite well into my next question. You wrote also quite extensively about changing the way we think about the definition of business, and how, if we were to redefine it, suddenly all of these informal spazas, hawkers, they all become entrepreneurs. And so, in your opinion, how should we think about how we define business, and how that would actually affect the way our economy runs?
So that same Gogo in downtown Joburg who earns 1,500 rand a month, if you say to her, do you have a job? She says in Zulu, "Ngiyasebenza, anginamsebenzi," which is a play on words. It means I work, I do not have work. Because having work is a pay slip. We've created a society which believes a job is a pay slip. And even if we want to borrow money from the bank, you have to have a pay slip and a bank statement. And yet there's this vast number of people who don't have a pay slip, who are self-employed and employing people who we ignore because we don't recognize them as being in an office or being in a physical structure, or even being the kind of business person we think of. And recently the Minister of Small Business said, we need more entrepreneurs in the townships. And I'm like, we have hundreds of thousands of entrepreneurs in the township. We just have to recognize these as such.
Wow.
And, we have them, whether they're in the auto sector, whether they're in the fast food sector, the beauty sector, which is hair salons. We have a backroom rental, which is 20 billion rand a year. We have, the beauty sector, hair salons, 10 billion rand a year. And you can go on and on. Bakeries, I run a program at the moment for Supreme Flour with township bakeries. And the one bakery I was at in Tembisa, near Midrand on Monday. This lady is working from a little kind of building in a shack settlement. She sells 4,000 loaves of bread a day. She has 7 bakkies that go and deliver this bread. And she buys 12 pallets. Each pallet has about 30 10 kg bags. She buys 12 pallets of flour from Supreme every single month. She employs 14 people. But, and she's driving a cool little BMW. And, but people don't recognize her as a business person. And yet there's many people like her. And we should be actually celebrating these and recognizing them. And also changing the rules of how we see financing and even how you register a business. She doesn't have a physical address. If she has to register her business, she can't produce a utility slip because it's an informal structure in an informal settlement. So even if she wants to register a business, she's going to struggle to. So these are the things we need to look differently at that sector.
How would you envision regulation like that working?
So the first is you need to remove friction in the system. I mean, I sold my business Minanawe at the end of 2018 and sold it to a French multinational, and I had a big staff and financial director and stuff. Then I tried to register a new business, and found it was so hard work that I actually got an accountant to do it for me.
Yeah.
In Rwanda, it takes 4 days to register a business. In South Africa, it takes 40 days. So just simple things like that, how we can remove red tape, we make it easier, and so on. And I think we'll find that can really elevate our economy.
You wrote that the Kasi takeaway market alone is worth about 80 billion rand, and the FMCG retailers and Spazarettes are worth about 150 billion rand. So I wanted to ask you, how big do you think the African informal economy really is?
Yeah, so those figures were in 2018. The recent report from a company called Trade Intelligence shows the Spaza sector worth 187 billion rand a year. So it's just in the last 4 or 5 years, it's grown by 30 billion rand almost. So the same with the fast food sector. It's now worth about 90 billion rand across around 50,000 outlets. And in fact, ShopRite, who are really big in this sector, have just launched a wholesale business, ShopRite Cash and Carry. Because they've kind of said, if you can't beat them, you need to supply them. So the total sector, is across a range of sectors. The information I have is about 750 billion rand a year. And that probably only represents about 2/3 to 3/4 of the total informal sector.
Is that for South Africa or Africa?
Just in South Africa.
Oh my goodness.
One of the fastest growing sectors. I mean, as an example, just the taxi industry, those taxis we all know and love, is worth 50 billion rand a year across 250,000 taxis.
Jeez.
So that 750 billion is an dramatic underestimate, but it's a huge, huge sector.
So if the sector is so lucrative and it's so big, and like you say, it's worth billions and billions of rands, where's all the money gone?
There's different answers. So I'll start with the Spaza sector is about 70% immigrant or foreign traders, and those are Ethiopians, Somalis, Pakistanis, and Bangladeshis. And if you just search, first of all, if you just look at companies, the huge explosion of money transfer companies sending money outside of South Africa. There's Mama Money, there's Mukuru, there's EcoNet, EcoCash, there's Flash, and Hello Pay. They're all sending huge amounts of money to Somalia, Bangladesh, Pakistan every single month legally, but huge amounts of money are exiting on legal rails. But then you have other things like something called So just, you have these informal hawala. It's an informal, probably under the radar money transfer system where you send money via hawala trader in the streets of Fordsburg, and then it pops up in Mogadishu or Addis Ababa and so on. So that's the kind of foreign trade. You also just Google headlines of how much money has been intercepted by, like there was some guys at Bloemfontein Airport, two Somalis who were arrested with 40 million rand and dollars in their suitcase, and the Mozambique border post, $8 million, and so on and so forth. So that's the one side of it. Another side of it is that if you look at any businesses that focus, formal businesses focusing on this market, if you look at Capitec is one of the most successful banks in Africa. It's in fact the largest bank in Africa by numbers. Done a lot of work with them. You just keep growing their numbers. They got 22 million accounts. I think the next biggest is FNB with 10 million. So it gives you a sense of the scale.
Double.
And they focus on this market, and they agree with me that there's huge amounts of money. If you look at ShopRite's turnover is booming. How is that possible if we've got a 30-odd% unemployment rate? Where's the money coming from? ShopRite keeps on growing by 10% plus year on year. I saw some headlines the other day of a company I work with, Vugile Property Fund. The Vugile Property Fund has shopping centers in town as well as in rural areas and urban areas. And they recently showed that their township shopping centers were growing 3 times faster in turnover than the urban ones, and the rural ones were growing twice as fast as the urban ones. So, how's it possible? And there's other companies like Exemplar, which owns rural and township. These are listed companies showing massive growth within townships. So the point is that if formal unemployment is so high, how is that possible? The township and rural formal businesses like ShopRite, like Vugile, like Capitec, and people like PEP and others who focus on that market are doing 5, 10, 15% growth year on year.
So what should the unemployment rate look like in your opinion?
So my argument is that we need to, it's a crazy thing is that if you look at Stats SA, there's an expanded definition of unemployment. And in essence, the expanded definition says if someone's not looking for work because they've given up, they're still considered unemployed. So my argument is you need an expanded definition of employment. Why would you have an expanded definition of unemployment on one side but not have the same on the other side? And my expanded definition of employment would say that if you have, for instance, if you're renting out back rooms, now the backroom rental sector is a 20 billion rand a year sector.
20 billion rand?
20 billion rand a year sector in renting out back rooms. And then the Spazas, these foreign Spazas, these Somalis and Ethiopians and so on, rent from South Africans. And there's another 25 billion rand a year earned by South African households renting out their premises to Spaza owners. So you've got there just 45 billion rand a year conservatively, just in rental. Now, those are passive rentals. Those are people sitting at home and earning, say, if you rent out your Spaza, you'll get anything from 5,000 to 25,000 rand a month rent. Renting out back rooms, the average number of back rooms is 3 back rooms, and you would rent them out.
The average number of back rooms is 3 back rooms?
Per household, yes.
Does anyone pay tax on this?
That's another story. But I mean, the average back rooms rents for 3,000 rand. So the average you're getting for 7.5 to 9,000 rand passive rental from renting out those back rooms. Now, if you're sitting at home and you're earning, say, 15,000 rand a month from renting out your home to a Spaza owner, or 9,000 for your 3 back rooms, you're still considered as unemployed, although you're receiving this passive income. So my argument is if you consider all forms of income and informal jobs, real unemployment today in South Africa is closer to 12%.
So much lower.
Well, that's more than half the official rate.
Completely. And So I just wanted to be clear. So money that is being generated in the townships is either getting sent overseas back home, or is getting spent at large corporates that have property in the townships. Is that what you're saying?
There's a huge amount of money circulating within the township economy, which is very difficult to measure. But so in essence, if you're wanting to build 3 back rooms to rent, you go to a local township builder and you pay him. The going rate's about 80,000 Rand a room, and you will pay him to build your back rooms. And then you'll need cupboards inside that room. So then you pay a local township carpenter to come and put in cupboards and stuff. You'll use a township electrician. You'll use a township plumber. And then you will need to transport the building material there. You use one of the township bakkie brigade, who you pay to bring your cement and stuff there. And outside every wholesaler and hardware store, you have this row of bakkies, and these guys just transporting stuff.
Yeah.
Uber style, you kind of WhatsApp him and he comes there and then charges you. And so you have all of these businesses. People don't phone, a formal builder in town and say, hey, come and give me a quote. They get a local person who's been referred to them for everything. So you have a huge amount of that money is actually circulating within that community, and that creates a massive enrichment basis, because as money circulates and doesn't exit that community, it has a compounding and growth effect.
The story of Abdul Rashik Ali, he was a Somalian retailer who was doing 200,000 Rand a month. I might be wrong, but he couldn't secure a manufacturing price from Coca-Cola because they came and assessed his facility, and they said that he didn't have the proper like loading bay or the proper specifications. He wasn't adhering to the proper specifications of a set loading bay. So because of that red tape, how much do you think, Gigi, are corporates and manufacturers and the whole formal sector, for that matter, losing out?
So when I wrote that in 2018, it was crazy. This guy was turning over 250,000 Rand a day.
A day?
And conservatively again. And when the guys came to see him, they said, no, you don't have, the truck had to park on the pavement and unload from the pavement. And they were like, no, you don't have offloading facilities and a forklift and all of these things. So they were missing out on turnover of, like hundreds of thousands of Rand. The absurd thing now is when I wrote the first book, Kasinomics, everyone was like, it's impossible, this can't be true. And then I wrote Kasinomic Revolution, and I called it Kasinomic Revolution because I said there's a real revolution happening since I wrote, which was, I think it was 2014 I wrote Kasinomics, and 2018 was Kasinomic Revolution. And in the 4 years, there was this incredible change with these informal businesses just more aggressively and more professionally competing with formal businesses. And the crazy thing now is that suddenly everyone after Kasinomic Revolution, suddenly everyone was like, hey, we're missing a trick here. And suddenly those companies have started. And it was quite funny.
So it took 2 books.
that also did this was Tiger Brands. And they were like, no, we can't deliver to these, what I call MIDI wholesalers. And they were all over the news about 6 months ago because they're making this announcement that they've got a new Spaza and MIDI wholesaler strategy where they're going to supply MIDI wholesalers direct. And their share price popped up and I'm like reading this and going like, hey guys, I told you this in 2014. 2024, you are going and saying like, hey, look how sharp we are. We're delivering. So, corporates are incredibly slow, and I think they've missed massive opportunities, which just shows also the opportunity for entrepreneurs, because, there's this gap between what corporates do and how long they take. And on the other hand, entrepreneurs who can make this connection between, the township guy on one side and the corporate. And I've recently been involved with a business called Yebo Fresh, which is a
cool name.
It's a Dutch lady in Cape Town who basically started delivering in bulk to Spaza shops. And she's recently sold that business. I worked with them for a number of years on it, and they launched in Gauteng. But they're now helping Tiger Brands get to the MIDI wholesalers and Spaza shops. So again, it just shows, this kind of online wholesaler could be an opportunity. And I think often the real opportunities in this space is how you can create linkages between this massive informal sector and a massive formal sector who really struggle to connect, and where are the opportunities, even things like payments models and distribution and so on and so forth, the big opportunities there.
That's so interesting. So, because, I'm at university now, and it's like you always they harp on about how different it is trying to, and I suppose it is true, but at the same time it's not. But they harp on about how different it is using e-commerce and selling to high income customers as opposed to selling to low income customers, and how low income customers in the townships much prefer hard, tangible. They're not online. They don't trust the internet too much, and it's interesting just to hear that story now about Yebo Fresh. It's like we are so far behind.
It's a misconception. Delivery and e-commerce in the townships, informal e-commerce is massive, but it works on Facebook Lite and WhatsApp. So I'll give you an example. There's a lady in Bali who's in Soweto who sells about 1,000 chicken a week, and she buys them for 45 rand, sells them for 110. Grilled chicken, they're grilled on a charcoal drum. Yeah. And Bali sells about 30% of her chicken is delivered, where she's got her profile on Facebook, sorry. Bali's Chicken Dust, and then you go onto that and you send her a WhatsApp on that Facebook link, and she gets the WhatsApp, and then she, with your PIN, what they call IPIN, it's not a location, you live in the location, so you send IPIN, you send it your PIN address, your order, and then she sends a guy on a bicycle to come and deliver to you. And she does about 30% of her business is like that. And the reality is the reason people aren't doing that is not because, the biggest problem with low-end smartphones, everyone has a smartphone, but these smartphones, the low-end smartphones, have very low memory, and you can only load 4 apps onto it. They come preloaded with Facebook Lite and WhatsApp. Then you're most likely going to have your banking app, which will be like Capitec. So that's 3 of them. Now you've got space for maybe 1 or 2 more. What will they be? It'll be TikTok. It'll be Facebook. It'll be YouTube. Instagram. You're not going to load, your Uber Eats app on there. So
that's so interesting.
But if Uber Eats was on Facebook, you go onto Facebook, you find Uber Eats, and then you send them a WhatsApp. And so like this company, Yebo Fresh, I'm talking about, they had an app and a website. And when I joined them, I said, get off the app and the website. Let's go on a WhatsApp platform. And they spent a lot of money building the WhatsApp platform, and was hugely successful because it's the medium that people are comfortable on. They don't want to go into a WhatsApp thing. They want to do this. And so the mistake is not understanding what are the problems that make people do something. The first mistake everyone makes is people can't afford it. Which is rubbish. It's like this. We just got to make it cheaper and data free and it's just rubbish, because actually affordability is the smallest issue. It's really how do you create value, and how do you remove pain points or friction, that people might have. And the thing with WhatsApp, as an example, is that it's in essence data free, because you buy a WhatsApp bundle at the beginning of the month and it gives you free WhatsApping. So even if you've got no data, your WhatsApp bundle continues. So you're able to use it throughout the month. And when you understand those dynamics, it becomes very easy to build stuff around that.
So would crypto have a space in the townships?
So there's a group in Mossel Bay who've actually got a Gasi a crypto thing, and I've chatted to them. I think it does. I think the problem with crypto is, again, the transaction they're using is using an app or a
like
wallet.
An exchange,
So there's certain issues with it. If you could trade using WhatsApp or an easier platform, I think, there's absolutely an opportunity. Wallets are huge, which is in essence digital currency. And so I don't think the issue is with digital currency or anything like that. It's basically how accessible is it to people? And, so do I need an app to use it? And then I don't have space for an app on my phone and so on. So I think there's other factors that might limit something or make it successful. And often we kind of simplify it.
I was at a conference about 4 or 5 months ago, and there was a man from Tanzania, and he was speaking on how we didn't actually realize it, but airtime was the very first store of value, was the very first technological the words, I forgot the word now, but it was the very first technological software store of value that was available to people, and we didn't actually realize it because you can buy airtime straight from the shop or online through a banking app, and I just thought that was quite interesting.
If you look at companies like Flash, Shop to Shop, Kazang, they all have these little devices on Spaza shop counters and other informal shop. You can go there, you can buy bus tickets and electricity and airtime and data, but also you can buy a voucher. And it's a digital voucher, and you buy that voucher, and then you can send it to your kids or you can send it to your girlfriend, and I mean, there's billions of rands just in vouchers. Now, vouchers are a digital currency. I mean, it's a digital voucher being sent to your phone, or a barcode or a sequential alphanumeric sequential number. And you're sending it to your girlfriend. You're saying, hey, here's some money, go to the movies, And so moving to the next step of a cryptocurrency is not a big issue. So we tend to not equate that voucher with a high-tech product, but it is. Someone's going into a shop, buying some digital format and forwarding it on or utilizing it in some way.
I couldn't agree more. I read in your book about your presentation that you gave to the executives of Unilever at the Michelangelo Hotel, and I'd love you to tell that story just because I was so struck. It was such an awesome way of getting the one world of 9 to 5 overtime, if you'd like, suits, ties, proper, to understand the world of entrepreneurial survivalism, and the early mornings, late nights, the grind and the hustle, I suppose, of the township. Yeah.
So not necessarily that trip, but I think a lot of times I get clients who say to me, "Hey, we want to go on a field visit into the township." And I'm like, okay, cool, no problem at all. Like, will you organize an air-conditioned combi with a cooler box of refreshments and will you make sure we have security? And I'm like, no, you're going to do it my way. And my way is basically what we call immersions, which is in essence you get into the feet of your consumer. And so, like we'll put them on the Gautrain in Sandton. They get on the Gautrain and they go to, which is like a space shuttle, and it's like, then they get out of the Gautrain in Park Station where it ends, which is in downtown Johannesburg. And then they walk through Park Station, and next thing they feel like they're in Lagos in Nigeria, and then we walk them through this hustle and bustle, and you can see they're kind of terrified. And then we pop them into a taxi, or they've got to stand on the side of the road and do whatever the sign is for the taxi, load them in a taxi, and then go into the township. And the kind of these Unilever guys, it was the same. They were having this meeting at the Michelangelo, and from the top of the Michelangelo, you can see all the way to Tembisa, and it's like this really glitzy, glamorous thing. And next thing, instead of a fancy Vito limousine arriving, these really battered Toyota Quantums arrived with drivers whistling, hey, Gibela 4x4, you must sit 4 people per seat, and rattle them off into Tembisa, and the same thing, having to experience what it's like in that taxi as well as in getting out. And then we do things like, with them, they've got products like Omo and Raja curry powder and stuff like this. And so what we do is we make them go into the Spaza shop and go and buy, Omo or whatever it might be. And then they don't have a plastic bag because no plastic bags. And they look around and they go like, oh, but there's a lady who sells those woven carry bags. And they suddenly understand, okay, that's why people sell those carry bags. They go and buy the carry bag, go back to the Spaza, load it up. Then it's tearing through their hands as they're carrying this thing, and they realize this, and then go into people's homes and really experience it the way people do. And it's not like the opposite is generally, you have a focus group and a fancy research facility in town where you fetch the consumers and bring them in. They ride the taxi in, they go and sit down behind a one-way glass, and you're supposed to get real insights and understand people's behavior and stuff from that, which is rubbish. You don't. So I kind of call it we do more discussion groups, and I call it the kind of tavern gathering. You go, if you want to know about alcohol, you go and sit in the tavern with the guys and you ask them there. You don't fetch them and bring them to your office in Sandton and then ask them those questions. It's just much richer insights. But then also go away with something they'll never forget.
Jeez. It's actually, I'm very late to the show probably, and you've been writing on this extensively for years. And to me, it's just so exciting for South Africa. And if we could just, find a way to embrace it and work with like these entrepreneurs, it would be really cool.
That is the thing, we're surrounded by negative stuff like the most unequal place in the world, our economy is flatlining, massive unemployment. And it's not true when you look at this. And we can accelerate growth so fast in our country if we recognize these. And we build these bridges between formal and informal. And they really are the solution to growth in our economy.
So Ramaphosa signed he assented to the land expropriation bill. What are your thoughts?
So, look, I don't think that the bill itself is that much of an issue, from what I understand. But here's the issue. The issue is it's almost like they're fiddling while Rome burns. He's like signing in the NHI, signing in the expropriation bill, signing in the Bella bill, while actually our economy needs a very different thing. And so I think a lot of those signing those bills are purely political,
yes.
Kind of point scoring that they're wanting to do. And the question we should all be asking is, how is that going to boost our economy? How is that going to create more jobs? How is that going to whatever it might be, because actually the focus should be wholeheartedly on that. The reality is that, the expropriation bill is all very well, but 90% of the people in the townships don't have a title deed. And they've never given them a title deed. And if you try to remove someone's property in the township, there'd be a riot. And so you can sign as many bills as you want into place. They wouldn't work in that kind of space. And should they not be giving more effort into getting title deeds so people own their property or own the shop or whatever they're owning in the township? Because that's going to transform things much more. Because currently, I wrote in my book that many of these traders don't invest in their businesses enough because they say there's no guarantee. tomorrow the Metro police come and they chase me off the street, like that Gogo who does the 3,000 vet cook a day. She uses an old door as a table, and she's like, no, if I got a fancy door and I got this and that, then tomorrow the Metro police come and they either ask me for a bribe or they confiscate my stuff. And so if we created more security, not expropriation, it's more about how do we create more security for households and businesses in the informal sector so that they spend more money upgrading those businesses and making them more formal and more sophisticated. Because that would really transform things. And if we spent as much time doing that, we'd have a very different space.
Wow. So I couldn't agree more. And the idea of, you wrote also about this in your book, the idea of, you called it a myth, the issue of immigration and the killing of the South African-owned Spaza. What's actually going on?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot all over the media and stuff, often that, the foreigners are stealing South Africans' jobs. And I think the first mistake about that is that the Spaza sector has this high number of foreigners. The fast food sector is 100% South African. The beauty sector is dominated by South Africans and so on. So we should separate that and not just an informal sector as foreigners. But if we look at the Spaza sector, in essence, what really killed the South African Spaza owner was the entry into the townships of ShopRite, Pick n Pay, Spar, and. And they were basically, the South African just couldn't compete with the formal retailer. And the foreigners started arriving literally a year or so after this great growth of entry of people like ShopRite and USave and so on. So by then, the South Africans had closed their shops and they were like, hey, this is a shit job. I'm not selling, Omo washing powder from my Spaza. And so the South African Spaza either closed up or they became what I call the forecourt of the township. They became like garage shops. They were selling airtime, bread, milk, those kind of things. They weren't actually selling groceries. And then these Somali guys who led it, they would come and they would say, listen, can I rent out your shop? And they were like, for sure, you see how you can do it. And of course, when they came in, they rented from the South African and they pegged their businesses at a ShopRite or Boxer, all these kind of guys. They made their shops open. They took away the little hole in the wall. They put in shelves. They put their pricing to be on par or sometimes cheaper than a ShopRite and so on. And then they offered credit to the social grant, the Gogos, on food items. And they were closer to people. They're in walking distance, but offering these really good prices in a shop you could walk into and choose which brands you want in a wide offering. And they were instantly successful. In fact, the greatest competition wasn't they were getting rid of the South Africans. They were actually giving ShopRite and Pick n Pay and everyone a run for their money. And my argument is, if you get rid of these foreign Spaza owners, you're not going to replace them with South Africans. South Africans aren't interested in that kind of FMCG retail. It's a really hard, low-margin work. So what will happen is that you're just helping ShopRite and Pick n Pay and Box & Co. do better. But what we should be recognizing is the massive value they're adding to South African consumers. First of all, they're paying the 25 billion rand in rent to South Africans. They're also giving credit. A Gogo who's got no money to buy her food at the end of the month can't go to ShopRite and get credit, but they can go to Abdul and say to Abdul, and he'll say, "Oh, Mama, here you go." And you call, the other thing is that you suddenly don't have to pay for a taxi. You're walking to the Spazarette, as I call them, these supermarket type Spazas. And whereas to the ShopRite, you've got to take a taxi and it costs you 10 Rand there and 10 Rand back minimum. So 20 Rand already has been wasted. Now you can spend that 20 Rand on more food items at the Spazarette. So we should look at the value, and it's just really been a myth perpetuated by particularly politicians saying foreigners have stolen South Africa's jobs. Yet they're bringing massive value to our economy.
GG Alcock, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. GG.
Great.